Welcome, everybody, to the Nuggets of Gold podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about KWaun Williams and whether or not the 49ers should resign him. So, Aiden, I'll start off with you. What do you think? Do you think the 49ers should bring back their nickel corner?
Like everything, I feel like we talk about on this pod, it all depends on the money. I think with the D Ford restructure, we're scheduled to have somewhere around 14 million. It honestly sounds like you could make that work. I think you could bring KWaun back for $4 or $5 million a year, but like if the Jets really want him, they're able to overpay. They have enough salary cap, and they're kind of in a spot that we were when John and Cal first got there, where they knew the guys that they wanted, and they were willing to overpay a little bit for those guys. Think about how much we paid people like Pierre Garçon to instill that culture. So Salah might have seen that. We know that he likes KWaun. But yeah, for the right price, would love to bring a guy like that back.
Yeah, it really just depends on, I think, who you would rather have back. Guys like Kerry Hyder, guys like KWaun Williams. And then there's some other names that have been floated around. Now, it's very likely that KWaun is back, but if he's not, it's also a position that could be addressed in the draft. I think it's Elijah Molden. A lot of people like him. And there's just a lot of players. There's a lot of solid quality day two corners. Asante Samuel Jr. is probably going to go in the second round. Maybe the Niners take Caleb Farley at 12, who I absolutely love, by the way. I checked him out last night. He is a stud. Super raw though. But it really just depends. What do they want? How much does KWaun want? So we've seen a lot of corners get pretty good money this free agency, and then a lot of other positions have been slow, such as wide receiver. But corner is a spot that has been paid. So you mentioned the Jets. We know that KWaun, that's his hometown. He grew up about 10 minutes from the stadium. Definitely an enticing option for him. But if you're KWaun Williams, do you think it's worth it to come back for the Niners on a lower amount of money? If that means you get a chance to win these next couple of years, because he is going to be 30 next season. Do you think that's worth it for him?
I guess it depends. So he's an undrafted guy, hasn't signed kind of that big contract. That's something to kind of keep in mind. Bounced around teams his first couple years, signed a pretty small deal with the Niners coming from Cleveland. Wasn't a big free agency signing or something like that. So he might be thinking, I'll sign a 3-year deal, try to get the bag, and try to finish out my career on a contender. Of course, like we don't know really what's going on in his head, and he's still making millions. But I think it's important to understand like this is an undrafted guy, hasn't cashed in, and it'll be interesting for sure.
I do wonder how much he would cost. I'm guessing it would be like 4 to 5 million a year. And I think if he went to New York, he could easily make 6 to 8 million on around like a 3 year deal. And that's per year, by the way. Not 3 or 6 million. I'd be all for that. But it's interesting to see whether or not the 49ers are going to prioritize that. We saw them go out, sign Samson Ebukam for 6 million before they went and got KWaun. They signed Alex Mack. They've had their mindset has been to build up the trenches a little bit more. And right now, they have Jason Verrett, they have Emmanuel Mosley at the two outside spots. And maybe they do kick Mosley inside and he plays nickel, but that would still require them going after another outside guy. So they're going to sign a free agent. It's just a matter of who. I think that bringing KWaun back makes a lot of sense if he's not demanding a ton of money, if it's already like not like predetermined that he's going to the Jets, which I don't think it is because we've had a week of free agency and he hasn't signed anywhere. So maybe he just has a couple offers on the table. Maybe the 49ers offered him 2 years, 8 million, and the Jets offered him, 3 years, 16 to 20, or sorry, like 3 years, $18 million, I feel like is what they'd probably offer. But I don't know. I think for KWaun, I think while it does make sense to go and get that bag, it also makes sense to come back and try to win. So I think that's what he's kind of. I'm assuming that's what he's mulling right now, and it makes a lot of sense. But overall, KWaun is a fantastic player. In 2019, he came out. He had 2 pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles out of that nickel spot, and 2 picks. So he was a very important player. I mean, 4 forced fumbles and 2 interceptions playing nickel is that was probably the highest number in the league. I like turnovers combined forced from KWaun Williams in 2019, so he had 6 of those. And then last year he had 2 sacks, and he didn't even play that like a ton. he only played in 8 games, and he only started 4 games. Well, he only played in 8 games, so he still had 2 sacks, and he was still very important when he was playing. But he's a guy that has shown that he's very important on the 49ers defense. He might not be the best coverage corner, but he just does all the little things. He's just kind of a scrappy player. He's only 5'9". And so if they want to bring him back, I definitely think that helps their chances of winning in 2020. Is he a long-term solution to that nickel spot? I definitely don't think so. That's okay though. Like you can have him and you can go draft a couple corners in the draft, and I still think it makes sense. I think that ideally you don't want corners out like starting year one, even if he's a nickel guy and he's only playing half the time. Like you don't want those guys on the field getting toasted at the beginning of their career. It just I don't know. That's my opinion on it because we see a lot of guys get drafted and then we're gonna start this guy. Oh look, he's still raw, he's still developing, and then he struggles early on. So I think by bringing KWaun back, they could kind of avoid that. Even if they take even if they took Caleb Farley at 12, I do think he would start, but at least he doesn't have that pressure to start right away. Or say they trade back and take a JC Horn or, Molden in the second round. But I I like the idea of bringing him back. What's your price? Like, do you have a barrier price? Like, all right, we can't go past this. Maybe it's just the cap.
I mean, so we have 14. I think we have to keep like 8 point something for all the rookies, assuming that we don't trade back or anything like that, which I think is a possibility. I mean, I'd give him 2 years, 8 million total or something like that, plus some in incentives. But they've been so creative with cap hits that like there's a couple guys who I thought that that there was no chance that we would bring back, but Kerry Hyder is a guy who's still on the market. Would you rather pay Kerry Hyder or KWaun Williams? Because part of what made that 2019 team so special was the D line depth. And you bring in a guy like Ebucam, and if you're able to bring back Hyder, that's huge. Those are like opposite Nick Bosa. Those are guys who can like one guy can play 2 downs, one guy can come in on 3rd down, and then they could just basically switch back and forth.
Yeah, and just that overall depth too. Because
Exactly.
I was looking at how the defensive line stands right now, and this is a little off topic from KWaun, but it's really about building, like the team building of the defense. So I think it's super important. KWaun, yeah, he would start a nickel, but for the defensive line, they need one more edge guy, I think at least, because you have Bosa and Armstead playing both the end spots on base downs, and then you'll have Javon and DJ Jones in the middle, and then you also have Kevin Givens backing them up. So you have a few guys inside, and then on 3rd down, you're going to have Eric kick inside too, and DJ Jones will come off the field, and then you'll have Ebukam come in. But you also want another edge guy to spell Nick Bosa, spell Eric Armstead on some base downs. And I think that's where you want Kerry Hyder. I do think that makes sense to bring him back. I also don't think Kerry Hyder is going to cost that much money. I think there is a chance that they could bring back Kerry Hyder and KWaun Williams. I don't know if they will, but I do think there's a chance. But now we see that they're interested in Tavon Wilson. So maybe they're just planning on bringing Tavon Wilson in. He's going to play strong safety, and then they're going to sign Kerry Hyder back. Like that makes there's a lot of combinations that you can go with. But if you had to pick one, I think you probably pick Kerry Hyder just because and you look at it from afar and you go, well, Kerry Hyder's not even a starter. Yeah, but Kerry Hyder's still going to get a lot of important snaps, and you don't want the guy in his spot just getting beat every play. You need another strong edge rusher. You need that second wave of defensive linemen to come in. We saw that in 2019. That's what let a guy like KWaun Williams excel so much that year. So I think that it's easier to replace nickel corner than it is to find a cheap depth edge piece, I guess. So that's kind of where I would lean there. And I think there's a lot of people that probably think, no way, like you got to bring KWaun back. He's a nickel corner, he's super important to that defense. I think that's totally a fair point. I just would rather build that defensive line depth and then find another answer at nickel corner because there's a lot of guys on the free agent market right now that have either been cut. I mean, we just saw, who was it? Adoree Jackson got cut.
Uh,
Kyle Fuller got
Kyle
cut.
Fuller, yeah, he got signed right away, but He went to the Broncos, but I think you bring up a good point. But basically, I guess that my final point is that the Niners have really set themselves up through free agency that they don't have a glaring weakness. They can go so many different directions in this later part of free agency and during even the early part of the draft, where if you want to take an edge guy at 12, even though it's not a pressing need, you can do it. If you love a dude at a spot, no matter what position he plays, you can take him because even there's not a position on the field where I feel horrible. Edge guys, like we could make it work even just with the guys that we have now. And of course we're gonna pick up some other rotational guys, but even like right guard, like that was a question mark. But Brunskill can go in, and we know that he can block Aaron Donald. Don't know who else he can block.
It's true. For some reason, he just dominates
He
against
just
them, huh?
dominates Aaron Donald, but it's probably good because we play them twice a year. So I feel really good about where the Niners are at. Don't have anything pressing, and it gives flexibility to bring a guy like KWaun or Kerry Hyder back when we did not think that that was a possibility 2 weeks ago.
2 years, $8 million deal. I could definitely see that happening. I don't know. I don't know what his deal with going back to his hometown, since he grew up 10 minutes from where the Jets play and where they practice and stuff. So I mean, it could make a lot of sense if he's always just had the mindset, I'm going to go to New York, and he just does that, and for some reason he's been waiting. But since he has been waiting, it is worth bringing up. Hey, like, could the Niners go get this guy? And I think the answer is yes. And I really just think it depends on, whether or not they think that it's more important to pay him or to bring Kerry Hyder back and have another depth guy on the defensive line. Because I do think it's very important to have that. Even though he's not technically a starter. KWaun is your nickel corner, so he's pretty much a starter. He's on down like every third down, every second down. But overall, I think that there's a good chance that we bring him back. So we'll see how that turns out. But if this is your first time watching the Nuggets of Gold podcast on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like the video, do all that. Podcast is also in the description, so make sure to check that out. But that's going to do it for today's episode. We'll be back tomorrow. We're probably going to have 2 film review episodes. One of them will be on Sam Darnold, and one of them will be on Samson Ebukam. So make sure to subscribe, come back, check those out. But we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.